Welcome to the first episode of Unbreakable Alliances, Trust, Communication, and Leadership from the FBI. This is a 9-episode series where we're going to explore how to build trust-based relationships that transform your personal and professional life. I'm Dreeke, a retired FBI agent and behavioral analyst, and I'm thrilled to share insights from my book, Unbreakable Alliances, and a career of recruiting spies and lessons hard learned. Today we're diving into Focus, the Power of Allies, which is all about why alliances are crucial and how to start building them. So let's get started with some questions that I know you're curious about. So let's kick things off with a story that really sets the stage. One question I often get is, Robin, what's the Black Viper case and how does it show the power of alliances? First of all, let me just share that everything I've written in all my books has had to go through the FBI pre-publication review process to make sure that I'm not disclosing classified information that would compromise people or operations or any national security kind of things. All my stories are true, fictionalized, and kind of smashed together in a bunch of things. But the Black Viper case is actually based on a real case I operated and conducted. The name has changed too. So Black Viper wasn't actually the name of the operation, but it was pretty close and similar. The main thrust of that Black Viper case was my first exposure to interagency operation, as well as multiple layers of FBI headquarters, teamwork. When I first came in the bureau, I got assigned to work counterintelligence in New York, and my job was recruiting Russian intelligence officers operating at the United Nations. Part of that job was to recruit human sources. My thought process was that it's all about the ask. It was all about the interaction I was going to have with that intelligence officer and how to convince them to betray their country and come to ours. The truth is very far away from what that is. Because what it first of all takes is not convincing anyone of anything. It's thinking in terms of how can I be a resource to solve a critical life challenge that they have and inspire them to want to trust me to be that facilitator of that. So that's a mindset shift that I didn't think of right away. But the other thing, the crux here that the Black Viper case is based on was one of my operations centered around one of the intelligence officers, a very high-ranking Russian diplomat at the United Nations. He had served with multiple other agencies and countries before coming to the United States. Matter of fact, he was a pretty senior guy. This was, I think, his third tour overseas, and he had served in London before. One of the things that you do when you work in the world of counterintelligence, whether you're CIA, FBI, or any other myriad agencies, is you collaborate with your foreign partners, especially if it's what we call the Five Eyes. That is the Brits, the Canadians, the Australians, and New Zealand, and us. So we're very, very tight, and we have lots of discussions all the time. My officer had served in the UK before, and so I've reached out to the MI5 and MI6 guys that were working at the United Nations and said, hey, for the sake of this, we'll call him Sergei Ivanov. Hey, did Sergei actually serve over in the UK? I think he did. And he goes, oh, yes, he did. And so at that point, it really dawned on me that I need to create a relationship, not just think in terms of how to recruit the Russian, but actually how do I inspire the Brits to cooperate with me. They had a lot of information. They had sources that had personal information about Sergei. So I wanted to facilitate a trip over there. One, I wanted to go to London and collaborate on this operation. How do I do that? I have to talk to my boss's boss, and have finance on my side. I need to get headquarters approval. I had to get what's called chief of station concurrence, and that's our CIA officer overseas. I had to have approval from the ambassador to travel. Anytime you're doing something as an official part of the United States government, there's all these levels you have to go through. It was huge. This is my first education in doing something a little off. I loved interacting with people. One of my few things I loved to do was interact and have great dialogues and collaborate. I loved working on teams and quickly developed a great relationship with my MI6 counterpart in New York. I wound up getting an invite to travel to the UK, invited by MI6 to talk about this case. I made a big faux pas here. I didn't realize it. The MI6 folks in the UK sent the invite through the FBI legal attaché, which is a proper protocol that gets sent to FBI headquarters for the invitation for me, Dreeke, special agent, to travel to the UK on this case. The problem with that is, for anyone who's worked in any kind of hierarchy in government or even large company knows, and you can kind of see the writing on the wall here, I manufactured an invite from a foreign partner, in other words, an outside agency, through headquarters without inviting my headquarters first. That was a no-no. So I get a call from FBI headquarters saying, who are you and what are you doing? Lessons hard learned. The Black Viper case that kicks off the book is all about the power of problem solving, life's most critical challenges with the power of relationships. You always have to be thinking in terms of anytime you're facing anything and a challenge comes your way, a problem if you want to call it that, the first question you should ask is not what should I do to fix the problem, it's who should I talk to? What relationships can I lean on? Can I call in a favor on? And if I don't have the relationships I need, what relationship do I need to build to work this problem? Without relationships, you're not going to be able to really solve any problems, because a lot of people can just flip a switch and make a widget. But it's really the relationships and the people in your life that help you move through these things together, because they bring their resources, they bring their networks of people. So it's people that solve problems, not things. And so that was my first critical eye-opener to the myriad of relationships I needed to move forward with this great operation to protect the national security of the United States and our allies. All right, here's a big one I hear a lot. Robin, what are those 4 keys to communication and how can I use them to build better relationships? These 4 keys to communication, which are the arc of my book and everything I do in life, are the 4 things I make sure I include in all my writing, texting, personal interactions to ensure that the shift goes from myself to the other person. I learned a long time ago, and I'll take you through the story that gave me this aha moment, that I was a little too self-centered in my language and communication when interacting with other people, and it's a real turnoff. How many of us have been in a conversation or interaction where you thought it was going well, and all of a sudden you get that blank stare, people look like they get bored and they just walk away, or they're a little bit offended. We thought the content of what we were saying was great and interesting, but all of a sudden the person just didn't want to interact with us. Most likely, it's because the focus of the language was about us and not about them. So a good many years ago, I graduated from the United States Naval Academy. I got through that challenging part of my life because I had strong relationships with my professors. I was not academically gifted at the Naval Academy. I was distracted with a lot of other things. And so I needed relationships to help me get through the Naval Academy and graduate. I became a Marine Corps officer. And at that point in my life, I thought I was one of these natural born leaders. I had always wanted to go to the Naval Academy. I wanted to be an aerospace engineer, Navy pilot, astronaut, all that kind of stuff. But I thought I was one of these natural born leaders because until this point in my life, I was doing something that most of us do at a younger age without actually realizing it. And that is, especially if we grow up with some challenges and some trauma in our lives, we get very adept at a young age of solving our own problems. I was very good at solving my own problems. I was innovative, solution-based, and always working a problem because I grew up in a house with not a lot of money. I had to go to work at a very young age. I had to lean in and do things to survive. And that made me a very good problem solver of my problems. The focus was on me. Fast forward through the Naval Academy and into the Marine Corps, I was also a pretty popular guy going through high school. Gregarious, outgoing, extroverted. I loved people. I loved interacting. But again, the focus was on me. It was about entertaining people. It was about being funny. It was about having a good time. And that's popularity. And popularity is about self. I was mistakenly making popularity the translation. If I'm popular, I must be a good leader. Popularity is about self. Leadership's about others. Here I am in the Marine Corps, and I thought I was this great natural born leader. At my first review by my officer in charge, and Marines are great at evaluating each other and always ranking you to keep you on your toes. And there was about 14 second and first lieutenants. I was ranked dead last, 14 out of 14. I go to my Marine Corps major at the time, who actually knew me at the Naval Academy. He wound up getting transferred to my unit. It was kind of neat. I thought, wow, I'm hooked up. The guy knew me at the Naval Academy to be a great guy. Now he's my commander here. And the first words out of his mouth after he ranked me last was, Robin, what happened to you? You used to be a great guy. And I'm like, well, that's deflating. But luckily, I had one thing going for me at an early age, and that was I never saw myself as a victim. I was not a wound collector, as the great Joe Navarro in his book Dangerous Personality says. I was always a problem solver. Wound collectors and victims see the world as against them, and everyone else is wrong. Problem solvers just work the problem. I had a lot of reps of working challenging problems, and I never saw myself as a victim. So I said, all right, sir, I get it. I'm doing something wrong. What is it? He says, oh, that's easy. You just need to be a better leader. It's just dumbfounding. I didn't understand what he's saying. Unless we have context from a previous experience, I had no idea what he's saying because I thought I was. And so I said again, all right, sir, I get it. I got to be a better leader. Why makes things very subjective when I ask why questions, and they make people defensive. It can make me defensive. But I ask what questions, what focuses people to be specific. I said, what specifically do I need to do to make it about other people to be a better leader? And he goes, that's easy. You need to make it about everyone else but yourself. Again, I was just like, what? I don't get it. Here I'm 23 years old or 24, and he's telling me these things. I didn't understand it because I thought I was. I said, all right, sir. I humbled up. What do I need to do to make it about everyone else but myself? And he goes, oh, that's a great question. I don't know. Figure it out. The gauntlet's laid down, and I spent the rest of my life to this day still working on it. But here's the keys of communication that he couldn't articulate, because interpersonal relationships and dialogues and forging trust and healthy relationships can be a very subjective art form. It can be very nuanced. People sometimes call it a soft skill. But you can actually break down the behaviors into actions. It becomes very objective, because there's always a cause and effect for everything we do as human beings. Here's what he could not articulate to me that day, because it's very challenging to think about, because he was doing it intuitively. These 4 keys of communication will shift that language from myself to the other person. And it's the same core content I wanted to say to begin with, but the focus is not on me. It's on you. And here's what they are. The first is seek their thoughts and opinions instead of going on and pontificating about, here's what I think. How many of us have said that before? Instead of saying, hey, what do you think about what I think? See, look at that. I can still share with you what I think without saying, here's what I think. If you ask them their thoughts and opinions, even if you want to share something, you say, hey, I'm curious, what do you think about this? And then you ask them a question about what it is your idea is. That makes it about them. Step 2, talk in terms of their challenges, their priorities, their friction points in life, instead of going on and on about what yours are. Make it about them. Human beings, we're extremely predictable. We're always going to seek safety, security, and prosperity from our own point of view. Instead of saying, hey, man, what a challenging week this is. I'm dealing with X, Y, and Z. Say to them, hey, what kind of challenges are you dealing with today? How's your Monday starting for you? What was the spark and inspiration in the challenge you had along the way that helped you arrive here today? Talk in terms of that for them. Because if you're not lining yourself up to be a resource in terms of those things for them, why would they want to have a conversation with you? Why would they want you in your life? Just things to ponder. Step 3, this is the crux to absolutely everything. Non-judgmental active curiosity. Here's what I mean by that. Non-judgmental means do your best to let go of your ego and your vanity and your own insecurities and your own pontificating about what you think the righteous things in the world are, your morals, your ethics, and all those things. When you're seeking to understand others, you need to understand what they think that means to them. I had lifetimes of reps doing this with the FBI for over 22 years. When you're interviewing everyone from every walk of life, from every country, nationality, gender, orientation, generation, you name it, if I start out a conversation thinking you're different than me, they're going to pick up on this. Instead, I'm non-judgmentally, actively curious. I'm not just curious about what it is I want to know. I'm curious about what it is that you want to share. Let's go of my scripting, and I'm being all in on you. It's also called being deeply present for the other person. So that's the third one. And finally, empower people with choices. Because if people don't feel in control of the destination that they're on, if they're not situationally aware, they're not going to feel safe. If they don't feel safe, shields up, no trust, and you're not going to go anywhere. So when you empower people with choice about the path to move forward, it does a lot to build trust, to make it about them. And a great word I used all the time inside the FBI was if. I had to recruit confidential human resources all the time. I had to have meetings with potential spies that are going to affect our country. I would lay out a plan in terms of their challenges, priorities, and pain points. Then I would say, if that sounds good to you, if you're comfortable doing that. If you're not comfortable doing that, please let me know what things I might be able to do to allow you to feel comfortable. That powerful word, if, empowered them with choice. We always move forward. Instead of saying, here's what I need you to do. When you're dealing with someone at a high level, when you start dictating to them the path that you want them to take, I can almost guarantee you the path they're not going to take. That one. So, that is the 4 keys to communication. Seeking the thoughts and opinions of others, talking in terms of their challenges, their priorities, their pain points, their friction points in life, validating them with non-judgmental curiosity, and ultimately empowering them with choices. When you do one of those 4 things, the shift goes from you to them, and their brain is going. The endorphins, the dopamine, the oxytocin, and serotonin, their brain is firing, saying, this person is all about me. They're inspiring me to feel safe. They're giving me situational awareness. I just know they're talking in terms of what's important to me, and I want to have an alliance. Trust is at the heart of alliances. And I often get asked, Robin, how do you build trust with someone new, especially when they're skeptical? And new people can be a challenge, but if you keep going to this premise I mentioned earlier, it makes it more manageable and less overwhelming. People want to feel safe, and people are looking for those who allow them and inspire them to feel safe, be present, make it about them, and potentially solve a challenge, priority, or pain point in their lives. Keep it simple. What can you do to inspire someone new in your life to feel safe with you? This goes to what I call the keys to trust. If you start interacting with someone right off the bat, utilizing these principles of trust, it's going to go a long way to have a great relationship and have trust start building. First of all, let me start by defining trust. Trust is not about morals and ethics and aligning our morals and ethical choices around someone else's that we have in common. That actually will potentially go into the area of liking someone. And liking someone doesn't necessarily equate to trust. I have many friends in my life. And just because I like you doesn't mean I can trust you to do certain things. So I make trust kind of in lanes. And what I mean by that is, think about this. I have a good friend, Steve. Steve's a great example. Steve and I have been friends for many years. He's another FBI agent with me. We worked counterintelligence together, and we knew each other many years. I retired from the FBI in 2018, and we are still friends to this day. All right, so Steve is a great friend. I trust him a lot with a lot of things, and I also happen to like Steve. But Steve is not a pilot. I'm a pilot. Do you think I would trust Steve if I threw him the keys to a plane and said, Steve, I need you to fly me to point A to point B? Do you think I would trust Steve not to kill us in that plane? No. Could I throw Steve the keys to my car and say, Steve, I need you to drive me to point A to point B? Of course, because Steve has reps in that area of trust. He has an established pattern of behavior in that specific area that makes him predictable. So to me, trust is the ability to predict what someone's going to do during X, Y, and Z times, over a period of time. Consistency, transparency, open, honest communication, and vulnerability in that specific area and lane. So just because I trust Steve in one area because he's demonstrated reps and reliability doesn't necessarily mean I can trust him in another lane because he doesn't have the repetitions in this particular lane. When I'm assessing someone, especially when I'm developing new relationships, I want to first be that person for them that is doing those 3 things I just mentioned. I want to utilize open, honest communication. I want to be transparent, and I want to be vulnerable. Vulnerable, not saying, ooh, I'm vulnerable. No, vulnerable means that you're self-aware enough and secure enough to share with others, when appropriate, what you're good at and what resources you bring to the challenge you're facing, but also being open and honest about what your skill set isn't in those situations. When you say to someone, here's what I can do for you, if you say you can do everything, that's disingenuous, which erodes trust. If you say you can do everything and you actually can't and you fall short, you've blown trust You haven't been honest about yourself and what you could do. So the whole thing starts eroding. So when I'm talking about vulnerability, I'm saying be good at what you're good at and be able to state it. That's confidence. But have the humility to say, and here's where I'm not good. Here's where I really wouldn't employ me at. If you need to put me in this position, here's what I'm going to need for a little bit more success. That's vulnerability. Vulnerability, the courage and honesty to say what I'm not as accomplished at so that you can make the best decision possible on how to move forward with me in your life. So again, recapping that whole thing about trust. Trust is at the heart of alliances. How do you build trust with someone new, especially when they're skeptical? Open, honest communication, transparency, vulnerability, and I'm going to add one more in here as well. Move at their tempo. Everyone has a tempo in life. It's the energy we put out, the speed at which we speak, the way we interact, the spacing we have with others, the verbal and nonverbal animation people have, the way they utilize their voices. If you press faster at a higher tempo than the other person is comfortable with, you're going to blow trust. You want to at least match that tempo or go a little bit slower to inspire them to feel safe with you. So again, open, honest communication, transparency, vulnerability, and tempo matching. That's what I do if I'm going to establish trust with someone new. So I'm going to expand upon this question of vulnerability a little bit more because the next question I got in was, Robin, why is vulnerability so important for trust and how do you do it safely? So first of all, let me give you this quote, which I actually love. Vulnerability is not a sign of weakness. It is a testament to strength. And here's why people like vulnerability. Human beings are extremely predictable, as I said before. Each and every one of us is going to act in our own best interest in terms of our safety, security, and prosperity from our own point of view. All you have to do is figure out what that other person thinks that means from their point of view, which is deep, active empathy, and you now know exactly what they're going to do. That's a guarantee of human behavior because we want to feel safe and we're going to do things in order to feel safe for ourselves and those we care about. Here's the other predictor of human behavior that's extremely accurate. We are all working on something. I did a lot of investigations in the FBI, not just spy recruitment operations, interviews, and interrogations, but part of those investigations, especially for espionage investigations, is you looked at human beings. I looked at a lot of human beings that weren't just guilty, but are also innocent as well. In order to find guilty people, sometimes you're looking at innocent people. I guarantee you, you don't know anyone perfect. It just doesn't happen. One of the reasons why we need healthy relationships and alliances in our lives is because none of us have all the answers or all the skill sets for interpersonal relationships to solve challenges and problems. So with that in mind, knowing there's no one perfect, someone that pretends to be perfect or not be fallible or not have anything wrong in the negotiation is someone you can't trust because they're putting a fake facade on. And so we don't trust anyone that says they got all the answers because it's impossible. It just hasn't happened. And so that's why vulnerability plays a crucial role. A vulnerability says that I am fallible. I don't have all the answers. Now, why this is crucial is it takes great courage and a lack of insecurities to be able to say that to a stranger or someone you don't know so well or someone across from a negotiation table that could be worth a lot of money. You're not going to convince someone you're interacting with to trust you because you say you're perfect. You're going to inspire them to want to include you and to build trust with you because you're allowing them to feel safe with you because what they see is what they get. They know exactly what they're interacting with. And so now let's do a little active empathy. Reverse the context. If someone is trying to tell you that they got all the answers, that they're infallible, do you trust them? No. So why would you try to do the same? It's really that simple. So remember, vulnerability, it's a strength and not a weakness. You just have to have the courage to use it. And also, you can't overplay it. You have to have it in balance. So what I want you to do is make sure you have confidence in the areas that you have strength in and humility to know where it's not. What you're doing about it, skill sets, the people you include to overcome that area that you're not as competent in or that you have some vulnerability in, That's what I'm looking for. When I was interviewing people to come on my behavioral team, which we didn't always do, it happened now and then, I'd have a lengthy application process. I needed your resume of all these amazing things you did in your FBI career. This interview that I was really looking for. One of the key questions was, tell me about your strengths and tell me about your weaknesses. What I wanted to know was that you're open and honest with your strengths and how your strengths were aligning with the priorities of the team and what I needed you to come in and do. And when I asked you what your weaknesses were, I wanted open and honest and transparent vulnerability about what you're not good at. And then I wanted to hear what you're doing about it. Because when I have that kind of individual that can be open and honest with the things they're not good at, but self-aware enough to say, like me, I'm impatient. I know I'm impatient. And so part of my impatience is I have people in my life, which I call my loving critics, that actually say, Robin, slow down. Do not make a decision now. Back off and give it this amount of time. And I must listen. I want things done quickly. I want things done now. I want to give an answer now, even though I should take some time, reflect, take in all the data, taking in all of the information, and then make a better choice than I otherwise would have made. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about vulnerability. All right, next, I love this question. Robin, can you give an example of how focusing on others' priorities has built a strong alliance? All right, so there's a great example first of how I blew it in one case, and that was when I was probably in the FBI for about 4 or 5 years. I was getting pretty good at developing confidential human sources. That's the people that help us get intelligence on our spies we're trying to recruit. It's a lot of human interaction, and I absolutely loved it. And when you're in New York City doing this, you get opportunities to take people out to find meals, take them out to do things, and really treat them well. You can hopefully inspire them to cooperate and give you information on the bad guys. The challenge with that, though, is everything I just said was what I enjoyed doing. I enjoyed taking people out. I enjoyed going out to find meals because let me tell you, as a entry-level special agent in New York City on the New York economy, my wife and family struggling financially. It was not easy. And so going out to a good meal on the government's dime to take out a human source was great. The challenge, though, was I was so focused on my priorities, recruiting spies and going out to find meals, that I had a brand new human source I was trying to recruit. The initial meeting I thought went really well. I was already in the groove. I'd already recruited a good number of them. And every time during the meeting, he kept asking me, Robin, what exactly do you need me to share? What exactly do you need me to do? And I kept avoiding that question because I kept wanting to find out where he wanted to go to eat meals next and what he's doing for this. I mean, I was really overdoing the rapport aspect and trying to treat him well according to what I thought. I wasn't treating him as he wanted to be treated. This guy was a researcher, a scientist, and he didn't have time to waste. He wanted to help in a very structured, methodical way, which I was not giving him. Long story short, I completely blew that out of the water, and he decided not to cooperate. It was a hard lesson learned and a humbling moment. Fast forward 15 years of my career towards the end of it, I had an opportunity to get a new position in the FBI. I had served as the chief of the behavioral analysis program. I had been in around 18 years. An opening was in an office about 5 miles from my house when my kids were in high school at the time, and I really wanted to be close to home. I had an opportunity to put in for this really great job 5 miles from my house. When's the last time anyone actually worked 5 miles from home? It was a great opportunity to continue to work counterintelligence. I had 400 to 600 clear defense contractors in the area where I live in Virginia, and a lot of people were put in for this job. And when typically people put in for jobs, they're sharing what they think makes them important to them. And you fill out that resume, you fill out whatever paperwork you need to do, and you say, look at me, look at me. This is why I think I'm great. But this is where I was focused on my potential boss's priorities. I had known him in the past. He'd come through Quantico, and I taught some courses that he was part of, and I knew him to be a nice guy and a friendly guy, but that's part of having a relationship, helping you out a little bit. At the end of the day, what people are ultimately looking for, what can I do to make his job a little bit better and easier? I called him on the phone and said, hey, Chris, I'm putting in for the position here in Fredericksburg, and I'm just curious. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to achieve? And he laid out his personal plan for what he wanted to do and all these milestones in his career. My next question is, all right, what can I do to be a resource to achieving those things? He started laying out good ideas and his vision of the priorities he needed to accomplish to put on his resume to get those promotions. After that conversation, when I filled out my resume to put in for that job, I filled in all those areas that I brought, all my areas of expertise in terms of his priorities, of the things he was trying to achieve in his career. That's when it really started coming together. I was doing all I could to make his job, make his life a little bit easier by making me part of it. And yeah, I got the job. And in my last couple of years in the Bureau was spent 5 miles from home, watching everything in my kids' lives and not missing a thing. So that is a great example of doing just that. Now, shift that from the work environment to spy recruiting. How do you recruit a spy? Be a problem solver in their life and then inspire them to trust you with their life. My main job every day when recruiting spies or even sources or anyone or just forming relationships was to figure out what critical life challenge they had. In other words, what priorities do they have at the astronomical level that I could offer resources for while displaying the behaviors of trust. In other words, if I approach them as a problem solver for a critical life challenge and I have open, honest communication, transparency, vulnerability, and I make that entire conversation all about them by seeking their thoughts and opinions, talking in terms of their priorities, validating them non-judgmentally, and empowering them with choices, why wouldn't they at least have a dialogue and conversation with me? And if they don't agree today, they might agree tomorrow. If nothing else, it creates a positive brand around me representing the FBI as a problem solver in people's lives. That is how the power of focusing on priorities really makes a difference. All right, here's one I get a lot, and I love it because this is the bedrock of what makes everything work in life when you want to make connections and forge great trust, healthy reliances, and have fantastic communication. And so it's this. Robin, what's non-judgmental curiosity and how does it help us connect? So this is a game changer, and here's why. First of all, I got to give you a little bit of context of my upbringing and background. Here I am, as I described, an extroverted, gregarious, outgoing guy. Grew up just north of New York City, about an hour north, born in New York City. When it comes to not judging, I grew up being extremely snarky with my mouth and judging people. If you're not rolling like me, you must be wrong. But I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just going to poke at you. I was really good at using snarky comments and poking at people like dumb, extroverted teenagers do, right? And so I had a propensity of doing that. But because I do deeply care about my impact on others, I saw I was really making people feel bad doing that. So I stopped it as I was growing older and got better at it. Definitely going in the Marine Corps helped me not do that and become less judgmental of others that weren't, as I say, rolling like me with my own thoughts, opinions, morals, ethics, beliefs. Going to Robert Greene's great work called Laws of Human Nature, all of us are genetically and biologically coded to feel better by validating our own opinion of what we think of the world. Just look at how news organizations and social media work. We consume information that validates what we think and want to believe. And if it's not that, we think it's wrong and we chastise it, we blast it, we scream at it. But that's not necessarily accurate. And that's also not how you're going to make connections. Since half the world thinks one thing, the other half thinks another thing, you got all these groups, how they think different things. But my job when I finally got in the FBI was to make relationships with everyone. I didn't have the luxury of pontificate at someone what I thought about their religion, their background, their ethics, their morals, their country affiliation, their nationality, any of those things, because my job was to build a healthy, strong relationship with everyone. There's a philosophy when I came in to work counterintelligence in New York City that said, our job is to build relationships with everyone we meet. If you start judging, you're not going to do that. When you work counterintelligence, every time there's some sort of issue or conflict with another country in the world, the first job you're given in the FBI and working counterintelligence is to interview everyone from that country in your area of operation. We're talking hundreds, if not thousands of people from all these different backgrounds. What do you think the likelihood is of someone wanting to have a conversation with me if I roll in and knock on their front door saying, hey, I think what you think is stupid and let's have a conversation? And whether you say it or not, it's going to leak out non-verbally from you. You can say all those right words, and this is where people can come across creepy too. So people can use those 4 keys of communication very well. Seeking your thoughts and opinions, talking in terms of your priorities, validating you and giving you choices. But if I'm sitting here non-verbally doing this and judging you with stress non-verbal indicators and disregarding the things that you're saying as I just barrel forward with what I think, it's called incongruence. You come across as creepy, ingenuous, and just as a jerk. You need to have congruence between the words you say and the emotions you have. You have to have this congruence to be genuine, sincere, and present for the other person. With non-judgmental active curiosity, you merely are seeking to understand the story of someone else's life. I do this with cops all the time. I ask all these law enforcement folks when I'm doing training or giving a talk with them, I said, how many of you have ever gotten someone to confess to a crime that wasn't in their best interest to confess to? And all the hands go up. What exactly did you do to inspire someone to share something that's not in their best interest? They don't know, because they never really thought about it. It just became this innate part of what they do because they learn through repetitions of what actually works and doesn't work with human beings. And I said, let me help you out. Did you actually seek their thoughts and opinions about what happened? Nodded their head. I said, did you talk in terms of their priorities, challenge, pain points, and friction points in life without judging them? Yes. When they shared those things with you, did you use active curiosity and more non-judgmentalism to explore the nooks and crannies of what led them down the path to make the choices they made? They nodded their head and said yes. I said, finally, did you empower them with choice to share what happened and confess to you so you could become an advocate for them? Or they could go in front of the judge, the jury, and be convicted at a much higher level. They said, that's exactly what we did. I said, so you used active, non-judgmental curiosity that inspired a criminal to confess to a crime that was not in their best interest to confess to. So why don't you do that with everyone in your life? In other words, active, non-judgmental curiosity. Active, non-judgmental curiosity is being curious without judgment. It's being curious about the path that someone else forged in their lives. And the active part is be curious about what it is they want to share, not what you want to know. Because when it's about what you want to know, who's it now about? It's about me. I'm still having curiosity, but it's really what I'm curious about. Some people might be offended. Some people might want to share that. And if you ask a question about something you're curious about that they're uncomfortable sharing, will you have trust? No. So thread and work with what they share. Easy question to start with. I start most of my conversations with someone brand new with simple. What was that spark and inspiration many years ago that inspired you to be here with me and who you are today? Go. And then you listen. And as they say this, you say, oh, before you move on to the next thing, where did you grow up? What was it like in your house? All these little nooks and crannies they're sharing, those are the things that you are actively curious about. People love to share their story. And when you hear them, you listen, and you're curious about them, you're giving them the greatest gift of being seen and being valued, because you'll start to naturally gravitate to drawing out from their strengths and the commonalities you have together. It's an amazing gift that very, very few people do. So that's why I really focus heavily on this active, non-judgmental curiosity. It is the greatest gift we can give another human being, to be seen, to be present for them, and be heard, and validate all that they are without judging it. Because walk a mile in someone else's shoes and see what decisions you would make. And as Brené Brown puts in some of her books, but first you have to take your shoes off. This is how you do it. All right, so let's tackle this one. A little more challenging. Robin, how can we handle conflicts and alliances using my problem-solving approach? And this is the problem-solving approach I like to focus on, the who, what, and how methodology versus the why. Here's my thought process behind this. First of all, phraseology means a lot to me. I don't necessarily use the word conflict because conflict tends to be emotional, and I try to remain emotionless when working through challenges. I don't even call them problems. Problems puts a label of being good or bad. I really think in terms of challenges. Challenges are things we face every day in life, whether it's a challenge getting up in the morning because we stayed up too late at night. That's not a problem, it's a challenge. And challenges could be coworkers. They might have had a bad night and now I got to deal with their unruly personality in the morning. That's not a problem, it's a challenge. Problems puts a label on things that can make people defensive. And so at all times, what I'm always trying to do is not to trigger someone else's trauma responses to a situation. It's going to emotionally hijack them. So they're going to emotionally engage with a challenge rather than pragmatically work the problem. This is what leaders and great communicators do. They're a resource for people to move through challenges and not get bottled down in this emotional back and forth, he said, she said, clashing. I don't do that because that is just useless brain energy and crazy brain for me. So I always focus on what's the challenge, what do we need to do to move forward, who do we need to talk to. My conflict resolution is really pretty simple. Conflicts generally pop up when there is a disagreement how to move forward with achieving an objective. At its core, a lot of times when someone puts forth an idea or says how they should do something, we generally have a conflict with two things. One, the potential idea they're coming up with, and the other part is the way in which you're delivering that idea. It could be off-putting, egotistical. It could be delivered inappropriately from our perspective. That is our ego and our own insecurities speaking to how they're communicating, and we might not like their ideas. First, let's address the way it's being delivered. I tend to ignore that. If someone is talking to me in a way that I deem to be inappropriate, disrespectful, or talking down to me, what are those things that get people riled up, the first thing I do is I own it. What I mean by that is I go to Jocko Willink and Leif Babin's great work, Extreme Ownership, is what did you do that inspired them to communicate with you that way? Because no one wakes up in the morning and says, today I'm just going to be an ass and talk like an ass to everyone around me. It just doesn't work that way. Something's going on in their lives that's triggering something, making them feel a little insecure, a little unraveled, a little distracted, whatever it is. And what you did was you got in their way. You got in the way of the barrage of chaos that's going on in their brain, and it was directed at you. Very rarely is it personal. It just happens to be directed at you. So I always take ownership. What did I do to create a trauma response, triggering event, whatever it is that caused them to do that? And I'll just try to adjust my own interaction. I will do the best I can to mitigate that. Now, if it's affecting morale, efficiency, and cohesion, the way they're communicating, that's a conversation we'll then have different time to pull it offside to see what's going on in their lives that's causing them to have the types of response that might be inappropriate at certain times. It's all about them and their actions. First of all, I'll take ownership of this. I might have done something to cause that. Someone else in the room might have done something to cause that. So let's focus on the content of what they're saying. Now, if what they're saying is good, this is easy. Then we just validate it. That's a really good idea. What kind of ways you think we can implement it? What can we do next? Again, very key. I'm asking what questions. What questions help people stay pragmatic and thoughtful? Think about this. What do you think the next steps are? What do you think will be the outcome? What is the outcome you're hoping for? Or even if something went sideways, what was the outcome you're expecting? What would you do differently next time? What do you think the cause was that you wouldn't do again? As opposed to, why did you do it that way? When you start asking those why questions, we now go into a more subjective area of communication where it's more emotionally based. And when I start asking whys, didn't that sound like I'm challenging you? Didn't it sound like I disregarded how you're doing this? Doesn't it sound like I'm judging the living hell out of you? As opposed to keeping it pragmatic, what questions? What were you hoping to achieve? What would you do differently next time? What can I do to be a resource to better affect the outcome? See what I mean? Pragmatic problem solving using what questions versus the why questions. Who should we approach to be part of the team? What relationships do we need to have that we don't have now that would help us in the future? So keep a focus on the what and the who. That is how I work with conflicts and just avoid them altogether, because I just don't think in terms of them. All right, here we go. Here's the last great question I typically get on this chapter. Robin, why is making the first move so important, and what's at stake? Let me explain this. I call this courage. It takes a lot of courage to make the first move. And what I mean by first move is, who's going to make that first attempt to give trust? Who's going to be the first one to take that leap to discover the life arc of others by asking that question? What was that spark and inspiration that brought us together here today? What path are you walking? What are your greatest challenges that you face this week? Do not fear the start, and have the courage to be open, honest with your communication, offer transparency, and most importantly, it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable. And the key to that vulnerability, again, is to not double down that you're incompetent, because that does not build trust. You're going to double down on the fact that you're transparent with what you're good at, and also double down on transparent with what your challenges are, but what tools and resources you've brought to bear to work on those. Who's on your team that brings all these things together that we together can work through these challenges. So to me, it's just the courage to start, the courage to offer that trust first. It's not like it's a carte blanche, big paintbrush, I trust everything. Like I said at the very beginning, you're not going to throw keys to a plane to someone that's not a pilot and say, hey, I trust you to fly me to X, Y, and Z. I can trust that you're going to want to communicate in a healthy way. We just have to see where we start to align in all these different areas by having a great conversation and a great dialogue, by making it all about the other person, by using those great 4 keys of communication, resolving any challenges that come along the way by focusing on great what questions and not why questions, and focusing on them by being present, organic, and sincere with your active curiosity about who they are, what challenges they face, and what you can do to be a resource in their lives. All right, folks, that is it for episode 1. We covered a lot today, from the power of alliances to the Black Viper case and the 4 keys of communication. I hope you're inspired to start building your own unbreakable alliances. In the next episode, we're going to dive into chapter 2, trust. And don't forget, please subscribe, leave a comment with your questions, and let's keep the conversation going at robindreeke.com. If I can be a resource for you, your organization, or anyone else in your life, please reach out at any time. Best wishes, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next episode.